Hello, everybody, and welcome back into another episode of the Prospect Corner here at the Hockey Writers. And we're getting together just right a couple days after the draft has ended. We had our reaction show with Devin and I right after the draft. Peter was still there, so we're now back together again. And now we're going to talk about the full 7 rounds, not nitpicking the 7th round, but we will be talking at length throughout the offseason, going to different teams' draft classes. But this episode, we're just going to go through a few different things about the draft. So, of course, joined in by Peter Baracchini and Devin Little, as always, my line mates here on the Prospect Corner. And, just before we get started, the morning skate. We always promote that, our great newsletter here at the Hockey Writers. Comes in daily every Monday, Monday to Friday, jam-packed the best hockey stuff on the planet. Daily dose of the latest news, rumors, history, funnies, quizzes, lots of hockey fun brought to you every day of the week by the Hockey Writers. And of course, there's so much rumors and trade stuff, free agency. So keep up to date with that newsletter in your inbox with your coffee and all that. So you can, of course, check that out in the show description. There's a link there. Put in your email. You won't regret getting that every morning. Okay, let's dive in. We'll start, of course. We'll start with our rankings. We'll get that over with. We won't dissect it all, but we'll look at our top 10s here. So starting with you, Peter, let's revisit your top 10. We went through it. We had an episode on it just before the draft. Were there any big surprises, coming out of that top 10 and what actually was the top 10?
Yeah, obviously the big one, Shane Wright dropping the fourth overall. Obviously Simon Nemec to New Jersey kind of made sense. I had him in my top 5. He was our top 3. Logan Cooley just dropped one spot, and then Wright and Slavkovsky just switched places. Cutter Gauthier going at 5 was, not a surprise, but that was kind of expected to see. Savoy dropping to 9th to the Buffalo Sabres. I think that's a big win, but then again, we could understand why, who went ahead of him. David Jiricek, Kevin Korchinski, big upside defenseman, Marco Kasper coming in. And I think looking back on my top 10, the only 2 omissions were Korchinski and Kasper, and I had them at 12 and 18 respectively. They moved up. Lekaramaki fell to 15th to your Vancouver Canucks, Matt. You must be very excited about that. And Joaquin Kemmel, there were, talks about him, his testing or his weight measurements, how it didn't quite match up with his on-ice play, and a little bit of, attitude and everything like that, mentality-wise. That's a big reason why he dropped and, outside of my top 10, but all the way down to, I'm having a hard time trying to find where he went.
17.
Where'd he go? 17. There we go. Sorry. Yeah. I just got in hours ago from a road trip, so bear with me on that. But yeah, those were the only 2 omissions, and obviously Kemmel and Lekaramaki dropping, Korchinski and Kasper coming in. Not too shocked about Korchinski moving up, because there were teams that were very high on him with his mobility and his development of his defensive game. David Jiricek, right-handed shot. Who wouldn't want to pass up on that? I guess the Columbus Blue Jackets didn't. But for the most part, I'm going to give myself, or based on that, 8 out of 10, 80%. Kind of happy with that.
It's not bad. I had a couple different things. Like Lekaramaki was obviously in my top 10. He dropped down. Kemmel went down, same thing. He was 10th on mine. I had the top 2 and 3. I had 2 and 3 right. I had Nemec in second, Cooley in third, and then Wright and Slavkovsky switched places on my things. But that everyone was kind of projecting Wright as first overall, so I don't think we're not in the minority. Jiricek in there. Gauthier was moved a little bit around. Savoy, of course, moved a bit, but pretty much the same type of thing. Guys kind of dropping out. Korchinski, I had a little later. He was in the top 10. Mintyukov was in the top 10. He went down. It was 12th on mine. Matejchuk, similar. So, it's a lot of the names are right. It's just kind of moved around a bit. Overall, I think we did pretty good for our top 10s. Looking at it all now and the reality of what the draft actually went. So, I mean, for the top 10, pretty good. For the first round in general, I don't really want to go there because there was quite a few guys we'll talk, that were moving around. So, but the top 10 was pretty good. Let's move to our guys that are a little further down in surprises, risers and fallers, and we'll get Devin's opinion on this too. We'll start with you, Devin. Any kind of risers, significant risers or fallers, looking at both of our rankings that you kind of saw in this first round or in general?
Well, the first one that really kind of jumps out to me, we talked about him being a do not draft person. That's Maverick Lamoureux going 29th overall to the Arizona Coyotes. And to be fair, this was a name that was mentioned as a first round candidate, going back a couple months ago. So the groundwork was there for him to be considered in this range. But as we got closer and closer to draft time, we were, the three of us at least were pretty convinced that he was not a first round talent. The Arizona Coyotes clearly thought differently. Added a lot of size in that kid, that is for sure. Hopefully he is able to develop a toolkit, because if he can, that's a big piece for their blue line. Another one for fallers, I'll say, the biggest one that stood out to me was Kamel falling from 10, 11, somewhere in that range to 17. Good on Nashville for getting that talent at 17. Usually when you start to talk about picks in that range, you're talking about players that are going to be kind of like good, really good, but complementary forwards. And I think Kamel has the potential to be, a line driver and be kind of like a main fixture on his line when he does reach the NHL. So to get a player with that kind of upside at 17, good on Nashville, and good on them for not being scared away by whatever, was responsible for him falling in the first place.
Well, I mean, it was kind of interesting to see him fall that much. I didn't think he would. He was kind of falling when we were talking to Tony about, I think it was Tony that was saying about he's a big shooter in different, areas that are not high danger. I mean, he scores from far out, right? So that also may be something that teams are kind of looking at, that he's got to get more inside and high danger to be scoring goals. So I don't know. I mean, I think Nashville got a steal down there. We'll talk about steals later on too. But Peter, you see anyone from both of our rankings that kind of significantly fell, significantly rose up in the actual draft?
Yeah, I'm gonna say Philip Beestead. I had him ranked 40th on mine. The San Jose Sharks took him 27th overall. I've always liked him. I really have. And that's dating back to the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, where he has that size, the speed, or the mobility for his size, able to pull away from, defenders and, just generate a breakaway. And his stride was just very great for his size. In terms of overall projectability, you kind of see him as maybe third liner, possibly at best top six, but you know what you're getting with the center in, kind of like Owen Beck, Yuri Kulich, those that have more top six upside than compared to Beestead. And nothing against him. I still love him, but I really always thought of him as a second rounder compared to those players that have more projectability. And Owen Beck, coincidentally was taken really early, 33rd overall at the start of that draft by the Montreal Canadiens. So big win on them. But I thought Beestead was a little bit rich, even as a late first for my liking. I did have him as a late first at the beginning, but just really didn't quite have it throughout the season to be that consistent. As for fallers, I'm going to say this right now. Isaac Howard going to the Tampa Bay Lightning, 31st overall, and obviously it has to be Tampa Bay. I had him 21. I had him inside. I was this close to having him inside the top 20. I was going to say Brad Lambert, not Adam Lambert. I'm thinking of Queen again. I said this on a different podcast. Brad Lambert, sorry, but Adam Lambert is still a great musician. Brad Lambert falling would have been kind of an easy faller for that. But Isaac Howard, for me, with his shot and his speed and, awareness to find the open ice and just drive to the middle with the power that he has for his size, Obviously not the biggest, but very effective when he does that. I thought he really improved his stock to be a top 20-25 prospect. For him to fall down to the Tampa Bay Lightning, I mean, that's just an absolutely big win, even though they may not come out as a major winner all around. But that was a great pick for me for the Tampa Bay Lightning, because I thought that he should have been higher.
Yeah, and Isaac Howard, probably one of the most well-dressed. And
yeah.
Wasn't he the one with the really nice suit?
With the turtleneck and everything.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he's got some style there too.
Not a big fan, but he pulled it off.
Yeah.
He's an interesting guy. Looking like it. So, but of course, he goes to the Lightning, probably going to become another Braden Point type guy, and all some be a top 6 most likely.
Don't remind us.
So Lightning do. They always get those guys. For me, it's Lane Hudson. I mean, I had Lane Hudson I had him in the first round. I had him 24th overall. He dropped into the 62nd overall. He went down towards the 3rd round. And as he kept dropping, I was legitimately getting angry. And I was like, why is he dropping almost to the 3rd round? And then I started getting hope that maybe he dropped to 80th overall to the Canucks, but that didn't happen. Goes to the Montreal Canadiens. And I mean, that's a perfect spot for the guy. I mean, he's a smaller guy. They already got Cole Caulfield there. They got Martin St. Louis, the head coach. I think that's a perfect spot for him to develop in the future here, because, I mean, he's a small defenseman, and who better than a small guy to kind of teach him to kind of how to use that size. And he uses it pretty well already, I think, even in junior or in the U.S. Development team. So I'm not worried that he's going to be a great. We'll talk about steals. I won't say so. But I think I just gave away my steal. So Lane Hudson, the biggest one for me, dropping that. And then the 2 defensemen, Chesley and Seamus Casey, dropping into the 2nd round too. And I had them both as 1st round picks. They were I had Casey at 10th overall, 11th overall early on. So to have them drop into the 2nd round, it was really surprising to me. And where Casey actually went, I'm trying to find where he actually went. I'm losing him. Where is he? There he is. New Jersey, 46th overall. New Jersey again gets another great defenseman added to their pool. So there's a lot of guys that kind of dropped off, especially a few of the defensemen that we had in the 1st round. Some of these guys have dropped into the 2nd, and that's not bad. I mean, the 2nd rounders usually hit as well. So that was pretty good. And finally, Reed Schaefer was another one for me, putting into the 1st round when he was rated to be in the 2nd. But like we said, his great performance in the playoffs, and that what kind of probably brought a lot of teams' attention. So Edmonton gets him and seemed to love it because he's an Edmonton boy. So that's a perfect fit for the guy too. I mean, a few surprises in there. I mean, of risers, fallers, but that always happens. It's going to end up being, 5 years down the road to see if any of these were actually good where they went, or they were a bit of a reach, but we'll find out as we go down the line here. Okay, let's talk about some surprises overall. But I'll say this, other than Slafkovsky going 1st overall and Wright going 4th, because those are obviously surprises. But any overall surprises of guys of where they went? I mean, we talked a few about our rankings, but specifically in the whole draft of where they went in any parts of the draft. I mean, any reaction of surprising players? Peter, we'll start with you.
Surprised in a good way, because I thought he was going to fall. Frank Nazar going 13th to Chicago. I thought he would have gone a little bit lower considering where he's been in Central Scouting rankings, but in our rankings, he's been ranked higher up and even outside sources. I tweeted out before Chicago picked, they traded away Alex DeBrincat, and I immediately thought, could they go Nazar here? Because of the fact they traded a high-end skilled winger, or in this case, a centerman. He can play both. But a lot of offensive upside to replace DeBrincat, and lo and behold, they already did. So that was a good surprise for me. Another one, Noah Warren, 42nd to Anaheim. I really liked him. throughout his season. I think he's got a very sound, steady defensive game and an improving offensive game. He said that he wanted to improve in that department. And, he's got great confidence, great physicality, and great, compete level. And I think, he fills out that right side with, the defense that they have with Olin Zellweger. I think obviously may not be in the top pairing conversation, but, the depth on the right side is going to help them out tremendously. And one player that I said everyone should keep an eye on, because I had him ranked 77th, George Figueres from the OJHL, goes 83rd to the Dallas Stars. And to me, I thought that he was going to be an excellent value pick in the third round, possibly higher up, or fourth higher up. And lo and behold, again, he goes in the third. He goes a little bit lower than where I had him, but you know what? Good on the Dallas Stars, because his two-way game, his mobility, and the size that he already had and possesses in the smarts, I think it's just really fantastic for them. So despite being forward heavy last year, focusing on defense here was a really great add. And again, they took Liam Bixel top 20, kind of a bit of a surprise there as well that I should mention, but we all know that he was probably going to get taken high up because of his size and mobility. But yeah, those are my top surprises for more so on a positive light as opposed to a negative, because I was really high on those players and those teams got good value for them.
Yeah, agreed on all those guys. Definitely. Devin, for you, any surprises that you kind of saw? I mean, good or bad? I mean, throughout this draft as it wrapped up here.
Well, there's no shortage of surprises. It's kind of hard to nail down just one or two. So I'm gonna actually give you three. In the third round, I thought Bryce McConnell Barker went way lower than I thought he was going to. The last pick of the third round, 97th overall to the New York Rangers. If he becomes what I think he has the potential to become, that's a big old value pick for the Rangers.
Yeah.
Good on them. Another one, we'll go to the second round. You always wonder when goalies are going to go, especially in a class like this where it wasn't very goalie heavy. There wasn't a lot of standout goalies. But I was a little surprised to see Buffalo jump on Topias Lanninen as the first goalie off the board at 41st. Because just maybe a little bit earlier than I would have liked to have seen a goalie go in this class. But at the same time, if you're going to take a goalie, you've only got so many opportunities to do it. So I think Buffalo kind of just seized the opportunity basically to do it. But also it's the fact that the Sabres are the ones who drafted him, and they've got Ukko-Pekka Lanninen or whatever his name is, and they've got Devin Levi. It doesn't hurt to have goaltending prospects in the system, to have as many as possible. But I wasn't, if you would have told me to blindly guess what team was going to take the first goalie off the board, I would not have guessed the Sabres. And then rounding it out with the first round here, the one that kind of stands out to me, at least as a surprise, was where's he at? Chicago's third pick, which was Sam Rinzel. That's right. I just wasn't expecting him to go in the first round. Especially with Chicago trading up to get this pick. They moved Peter Mrazek to make it happen. There were a lot of interesting players on the board at that pick, and let's just say Rinzel was not who I was thinking they were going to go after. Still a good prospect. Obviously, they like him. But when he called, like I said, when they called his name at 25th overall, it was like, oh, okay. I thought maybe Howard was going to be the pick. I thought that was honestly who they were going to go for.
Yeah. Well, I mean, to toot my own horn again, I had him at 26th. So one later. And so there we go. I love how you say not to toot my own horn. You actually do anyway. So.
You got it.
Got to do it. So that's going to bring me to my surprises is Ben King. He was drafted 106th overall, or 107th. I had him at 106. So I was like almost right on the money there. And a lot of rankings, I did his profile. A lot of places didn't have him ranked at all. So, I mean, or in the 200s or something, like towards the end, sixth round. So for the Anaheim Ducks got him. I mean, they have experience with bigger guys. I mean, they have, they've already had, Ryan Getzlaf and guys like that have been in the system. And so, I mean, having a guy like Ben King, I mean, not saying he's going to do anything. I mean, he's an overager, but he had a heck of a season in the WHL, and he's deserving of being drafted. And to have him drafted that high, I ranked him that high, but I really didn't legitimately think he would go that high. So we'll see what he does, but that was a big surprise for me positively for him to be drafted at all. And to be drafted that high, it was great. And of course, I already said with Lane Hudson, a surprise for him to drop that far, but maybe not because of his size. I mean, a lot of teams are still kind of hesitant drafting defensemen of that size, even though there's quite a few that have already succeeded. But I mean, that's just how it goes. Yeah, like you guys mentioned, some of those were definite surprises. We could go through this whole draft and find a bunch more. But we'll talk about a few guys here in the next segment. Let's do that. I mean, let's talk about the undrafted. I mean, we talk about guys, all these guys get drafted, and I love what Martin St. Louis said at the beginning in his speech there, saying that, this isn't the end if you don't get drafted. I mean, he's perfect example of that. I mean, he wasn't drafted, unsigned free agent, and even the Calgary Flames gave up on him and goes to the Tampa Bay Lightning. And rest is history. I mean, he's a Hall of Fame guy, and what he did in the NHL is amazing. So let's talk about some of these undrafted guys that were surprises. Devin, we'll start with you. Any undrafted players that you were surprised weren't drafted this time?
Well, I'm only surprised that he didn't get drafted because I did his prospect profile. And after doing his profile, he was firmly on my radar as a potential value pick later in one of the later rounds. And that would be defenseman David Moravets from Czechia. Mind you, like I said, I figured he was gonna go in the later rounds if he was gonna go. Anyone who had him ranked had him like in the 5th to 7th round. So at that point, you could go either way. You're not firmly in any spot if you're ranked that low. But this is a player who has some really solid defensive fundamentals, is mobile, and what he lacks in offense, like I said, he makes up for in defensive IQ. I think he's a player that, if developed the right way, could become a really solid bottom pairing defenseman. And those types of players, you're blindly throwing darts in the later rounds. I figured that some team might take a shot on him. And that, like you said, Matt, with St. Louis' speech, this doesn't mean he won't catch on to some team in the future. Maybe he signs a free agent contract. Maybe he re-enters the draft. That could happen too. But I just thought the package was there to at least be worth a flyer in the 6th or 7th round, but it wasn't meant to be this year.
Yeah, talk about that's the thing. There's so many guys. There's only 200 and what? What's the 225? 227 players that get drafted. I mean, that's really not that much when you look at how many guys that are available. 225. Yeah. It is 225.
There we go.
And that's the thing, like there's going to be undrafted guys. And that's, like St. Louis said, the work starts now. It's even for the guys that are drafted, you have to keep working. Even guys that do get drafted never play in the NHL at some point. So you have to keep on grinding, as they say. So Peter, for you, any undrafted guys that you were surprised didn't get their name called this time?
Yeah, similar to Devin, I wrote his profile. Bo Jelsma. I really thought that, he had the offensive abilities and skill set that would just make any team, extremely proud. Great mobility, great stride, extremely strong on his edges. Can turn it on in the Jets in a flash. And obviously, it may be a byproduct of him missing the 2020-21 season, but he did have good production with 27 goals this season in 68 games and 47 points. So considering he missed the full season, I thought he was really great this season, but it just is a byproduct of that. Also, I'm going to say Spencer Silva. Again, same thing, another OHLer, but I thought he looked really, I want to say really great because, Team Canada wasn't that great aside from Bedard, Fantilli, and I'm going to throw Owen Pickering in there. But he had his moments at that U18 tournament where he was physical. He was able to, carry the puck in transition, great on the forecheck and making great pinches and reads. Defensive game is still a work in progress with him, although, again, missed season, one step behind kind of thing. But I really liked his overall play. And I thought that maybe he could have been not necessarily a third, but maybe at lowest a fourth, early fifth. I'm surprised nobody or no team took a chance on him because I thought he has a really great overall skill set that I think if you were able to develop just develop properly, I think you got something really good on the back end there.
Well, like we said, they could get drafted next year.
Yeah,
they could get signed by a team too. I mean, a few of these guys are probably going to enter prospect camps, get some experience there. I mean, a few guys did that last year, and we're entering this draft again. So for me, I've got a few. I'll start with a couple guys that I really wanted to get drafted. I did their profiles. Coach Adelic was one of them. I was amazed that he wasn't drafted. I mean, this guy is a playoff. I mean, he's a dream. You would want this guy in the playoffs, you would think.
Workhorse.
He's a workhorse. He did miss last season because of the OHL, but not for lack of trying. He went to Europe. He went all over the place trying to get some hockey time, never got it. But he's just one guy I would want on my team. So, I mean, it's interesting why he wasn't drafted. I mean, we of course don't know all the whole stories of stuff that, teams just may not have thought he was ready yet. I don't know. So he's going to go back and work hard. We know he will. I mean, his work ethic is off the charts. So this is not going to stop him. I'm sure he's going to, have a great season next year again. Marek Hayduk was another one. I thought he would, when it got down to the Lightning, and I'm like, oh, come on. And that was the last pick was the Avalanche. I'm like, pick Hayduk. Come on. But never happened. So again, workhorse guy, good guy. I think would be a two-way third, fourth line in the NHL at some point, and he could still make it there. I mean, we never know. And then the last guy I'll mention is Thomas Milic. I was really surprised. I mean, he went through the draft last year, wasn't drafted, then had a heck of a season with the Thunderbirds. And we talked about him as being a guy that would, for sure be drafted at some point. When they started having a run on goalies, I really thought Milic was going to be one of the names being drafted. So, I mean, he'll probably be at some prospect camps and rookie camps and see if he can catch on there as a signing. And I don't know if has another year of draft eligibility. I think he may be done. He may have one more year, but I'd have to look that up. But I mean, Milic is, again, there's so many guys that go undrafted every year, and more so this time because of the OHL being canceled last season, and then guys having only one season. Again, small sample sizes for these scouts. So, yeah, it's tough. So we'll see. We'll see what happens with them. I mean, like San Luis said, this isn't the end. You keep working and get signed by someone, and that's when you kind of keep going. Look at Alex Burrows. I always bring back as an example because he was undrafted. He went through everything to make it to the NHL and eventually became one of the better NHLers when he was there. So, this isn't the end of the journey. I mean, draft does not mean you're in the NHL. It means you have a chance at it. So even guys that are drafted, we know guys, they don't always make it. So work starts here, and we'll see what happens with all these guys 2-3 years down the road. And when we look back on this draft. All right, let's go to our teams, just briefly. I mean, we'll have kind of episodes. Well, we probably won't because this is pretty much our thoughts on our draft classes here. So let's start with the Red Wings. Devin, we'll start with you. We'll each give our thoughts on it too. I mean, you're the expert on the Red Wings draft class, I'm sure more than us. What do you think overall of that draft class? We know Marco Kasper's first round pick. But overall, what do you think how the Red Wings did in 2022?
Yeah, most of the conversation is going to pertain to Marco Kasper and whether or not he is going to become, what he was drafted to become. Because, let's be honest, neither of you guys had him in the top 10, and that you weren't alone in that. Even I figured he was more of a 15 kind of guy than a 10 or 5 guy. And it's not because I don't like the player. It's just for me personally, I question his ultimate upside. I'm curious if he really has it in him to be a top line center. And if you're drafting 8th overall and you're drafting a center, that is, at least in my opinion, what you should be shooting for. But that being said, Yzerman, Chris Draper, everyone who's involved with making the decisions for the Red Wings are very, very excited to have Marco Kasper. And they were very, very excited to have a guy named Moritz Seider. And a lot of people thought that that shouldn't have been the pick at 6th overall in 2019. So I'm inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt when it comes to Kasper and even some of these other guys they picked. Because I know they do their homework. I know it's obvious they do their homework. And if Steve Yzerman's gonna, vouch for Marco Kasper 8th overall, who am I to tell him he's wrong? I will say, just to kind of go down the list here, or at least pick out a couple names here. I do think, a lot of these names weren't even on my radar. I'll be honest, and I think that's the case with a lot of people. Dmitry Bolchennikov is a name that I think probably should have been on my radar, because after looking at him just a little bit, I get why they felt inclined to take him in the 2nd round, because there is a lot of skill there. I think that the biggest concern I have with him is whether or not he has a well-rounded game, and whether or not he's going to come over from Russia. And that's the case with every Russian that gets drafted or got drafted in this year's class. Dylan James, like him, I think he's kind of similar to Carter Mazer, which is another prospect to have in their pool. Helps to have as many of those, potential middle 6, 3rd line guys, because not all of them are going to hit. And it helps to have as many of them as possible, so that way you can fill out your roster in time, and then you have trading assets. But to kind of round up my thoughts here, I think whether or not, just to kind of more or less repeat what I said, I think whether or not this class is considered a pass or a fail depends almost exclusively on Marco Kasper, because we were talking before the show, how high is the Red Wings pick going to be next year? Is it still going to be a top 10? Because I think they're going to be in the 12 range, which means that their time of having these prime 1st round picks is running out. So you have to hope, if you're a Red Wings fan, that they made the most of their pick at 8th overall, especially, considering who went directly after Kasper at 9th overall. That would be the guy who I was tooting his horn leading up to the draft, but we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Dev, I talked to you. Peter, what do you think about the Red Wings class? I mean, obviously probably didn't delve too much into it, because you don't cover the Red Wings, but any names that you kind of thought up, because of course you cover the draft in general?
I really love the Tanais Mathurin pick. I wrote his profile. I think there's a lot of untapped potential. Known as a shutdown 2-way defender, but when he jumps into the rush and he's in on the offense, you notice him, and he does everything so well with his pinches, his reads, the ability to back check and prioritize defense when he needs to, and the ability to jump up into the rush. I think his skating is very underrated. I think that's a really great pick, and for Detroit to get him at early in the 5th round, I think that's a really great value for them.
Yeah, and I'll just say, because if you want my big thoughts on it, I was on the grind line when we talked about the draft class. So I'll say Dylan James. I mean, that was the guy I kind of pointed out. I haven't delved into any of the other guys on this list. I was more focused on the Canucks, obviously. So, Red Wings, I think overall, like, I love the Marco Kasper. I said his name right this time. Marco Kasper's the pick there. I mean, I think he's going to end up being a pretty good top 6 center in the future, at least an elite 3rd line guy. So maybe that's, a ceiling of a 3rd line is not good for a top 10 pick, but I think being an elite 2-way guy that can jump into your top 6 is pretty good too. So overall, I love the names they picked. Like I said, a lot of the names itself, not the the players, but I love some of the names on there. So Overall, I think, again, we don't want to question Yzerman because he's done such a great job with the Lightning and stuff like that. So it's best not to question him until we start seeing what these guys could do, because he has a pretty good track record. All right, let's move to the Maple Leafs. They didn't have a first-round pick. They traded out of the first round into the second and got Fraser Minten as their first pick. If you want, of course, there's a whole episode of Maple Leafs Lounge on it. So definitely check that out. They go in really deep, about 20, 25 minutes of it. So Peter, give us the cliff notes on the Maple Leafs. What'd you like about the class they have in 2022?
They went with smarts. They went with, projectability, smart two-way game, the ability to think, the IQ side of things. I think they nailed possibly every pick on the head. There was, looking at the second round, the names taken after Minten, where you had Paul Ludwinski, Julian Lutz, Luca Delbel, Belouz. I think those were names that were probably on their radar, but I think the fact that Minten continued to progress throughout the season with the Kamloops Blazers, obviously being behind Logan Stankoven, who just absolutely tore up the WHL. Really great playoffs as well. Again, when I talked to, or when I was in the media scrum with Minten afterwards, he was very well-spoken. He was very determined. He was giving his strengths, how he is a very smart two-way player with the ability to transition offensively, think defensively, and get into the right spots. And I think that's what the Maple Leafs are looking for, because throughout the combine, they were giving players, tidbits, or not tidbits, but like clips on what would you do in certain situations. So I think Minten passed that with flying colors, if that was the case. I also think that he's very reasonable with his projection as well. He said that he wasn't coming in right away to make a significant impact. He still needs to develop. He still needs to work on his game. And in a few years' time, I think he's going to do really well with that. Same with Nick Moldenhauer. I thought this was a really great pick. Obviously, the familiarity with Ryan Hardy and the Chicago Steel and the organization there. Hometown kid getting drafted by the Maple Leafs is also a huge bonus as well. But even at the U18s, I love this IQ, love this positioning. Love the fact that, he was in on the forecheck and very hard to play against, and it had a very great compete level. And that's the same thing with Minten as well. He has a high-end compete and energy and work ethic, and I think that's what they're looking for. Same thing with Gurbankin. They compared him to a machine-like type of player, and with his passing hands and control and everything like that, played on the same team as Danilo Yurov, and Gurbankin was second overall in point scoring. So that's a huge bonus. And Brandon Lazowski, I get a Ty Voigt type feel with him, as to, smaller player, high upside, goes lower than he probably should have expected. Ty Voigt was drafted in the 5th round. I on the lounge I said 6th round, but that was just the top of my head. I probably should have double checked that, but it is the 5th round. And Lazowski goes 7th, and I think is one of those value picks that's going to pay off with the Maple Leafs. Obviously, his skating isn't the best. Defensive game needs some work, but he can shoot and rip the puck from anywhere on the ice. So they wanted a goal scorer. They found one. I think the Maple Leafs, with the picks that they had, even they traded down to accrue more picks, think it worked out, considering you went from 3 picks to 2 to 5. I think that's a very successful draft for them.
Yeah, and even if they did go out of that first round, they ended up with a pretty good player. Fraser Minten, I really liked just watching the Blazers, because I'm following because of Victor Persson for the Canucks. So obviously you're going to see this guy. He's really good. I think it's a great pick in the second round. That's for the Maple Leafs. That was a good value pick, even though it wasn't a first round pick. Devin, you have any thoughts on the Maple Leafs draft class of the players that, we've talked about a couple of them here.
Well, I liked Peter's final point there, where they went from having 3 picks to 5. And I think that's kind of an important thing here. Last year's draft, Toronto only added 3 prospects. Now, mind you, one of them was Matthew Nyes, and that's a pretty darn good prospect if you're only going to get 3. But when it comes to prospects, yes, you want quality, but there is value in having quantity. And so missing out on a lot of picks last year, it helps this year to have added those picks. Now, 5 is obviously less than what you start with. You always start with 7 picks in a given draft year. But like Peter said, going from 3 to 5, that'll help, maintain that quantity, maintain that depth in your prospect pool. You've got to have prospects, whether you're a contender or you're not, because they'll help either on your roster or in a trade package. I really liked the Nick Moldenhauer pick. In fact, I think that's probably my favorite pick out of the players they picked. Getting him at 95th overall, I think that it potentially could be could potentially be a high value pick. Excuse me. Really like the way he's able to play with pace. I like players just in any stage that can play with pace, and I think that's kind of the name of his game. He's an offensive player. Needs to work on his two-way game, but most players at this age group need to do that. And he's a player that I could see in time. I'm not going to put a timeline on it. I could see him in time, being a nice complementary piece for this Maple Leafs team, maybe in like a third-ish line role. And he would have the potential to play with the more high-octane players on the roster because of his ability to play with pace and play a skilled game. So, great breakdown by Peter on all the players there. The one that stood out for me was Moldenhauer, but he's not the only good prospect they got in this year's class, and that's what they needed.
Yeah, I mean, the first, again, like I said, Minton's was a great pick in the second round. So, I mean, if they didn't move on, they got rid of Mrazek in the process. So that frees up contract spaces and stuff like that. So great. I don't know. I think it was a good move, even though they didn't have a first round pick in the end of it. Let's go to my Vancouver Canucks that I cover here at the Hockey Writers. I mean, first of all, Jonathan Lekkerimäki was amazing pick. I mean, I never thought he was going to drop to 15. Like I said, I had him in the 8 to 10. A lot of people had him there. Even the guys that cover the Canucks here in Vancouver saying, Lekkerimäki's been on their radar, but they're probably not going to be there at 15. Well, guess what he was? I mean, 15th overall. Canucks, of course, pick him. With the Swedes that are running that front office now, it's pretty much an obvious thing that they would draft him. I love him. I mean, I love it. I love his shooting ability. He's probably one of the best shots of the draft. Goal scorer. I mean, he is a bit smaller right now, but again, strength, size can be developed. He's going to be, again, developing probably in Sweden next year, but he does have the Vancouver Giants own his rights. And that'd be great if he could come over at the import draft, because the import draft, they picked him there. If he can come over and play in basically their backyard, I mean, it's like a building over. So it's like he'd be really close to watch. So Lekkerimäki was a big pick. Other guys, I mean, they ended up drafting a few defensemen. One named Elias Pettersson, the same name as, of course, Elias Pettersson that the Canucks have as a forward. That's gonna be fun. It's gonna be fun. If the defenseman Elias Pettersson makes the NHL, it's going to be interesting to see how they distinguish them. I mean, one's a defenseman, but it's going to be hard. They can't even have an E Pettersson on the jersey. I don't know how they're going to even distinguish them in the jersey too. But they had some humor about that when he was drafted. Pettersson tweeted out saying that, I guess we're gonna have to find another nickname for me now, because it can't be EP anymore. Because he's gonna have to have a different number, because he wears number 40 in Sweden. The defenseman does too, which is interesting how it's the same number too. So, I mean, it wasn't a gimmicky pick. I mean, Elias Pettersson, the defenseman, he's a pretty skilled guy. I mean, he's big. He's a good transition guy. He hits. He's got a bit of potential in the NHL. So, it wasn't just a pick because his name was Elias Pettersson. So, it was a fun time there. Another guy that's intriguing to me, I didn't have him on my radar at all, is Damon Gardner. Played for War Road High School, had 45 goals for them, and he projects as a good two-way third line guy. One of the guys that kind of really good in the middle of the ice. He's not afraid of that. Good two-way, could be a third line, like I said. So that was an interesting pick to me. And then finally, I mean, if you want a breakdown of all the stuff, I've got an article out at the Hockey Writers that kind of breaks down each of these guys' games. So if you want a lot more detail on them, definitely check that out. Shameless plug on that article. And then finally is the Russian they drafted in the seventh round. Just lost his name for a second here because of course I'm gonna have to pronounce it. Kirill Kudryavtsev. He played Kudryavtsev. Yeah, he played for the Sioux Greyhounds for the OHL, and he was projected. A lot of rankings had him in the 5th, 6th round, and ended up going down to the 7th, maybe because he was Russian. I don't know, but had a pretty good season over in the OHL and pretty productive. Again, projects as a good mobile. Doesn't have as much size as the other defensemen they drafted this year, but I'm intrigued to see what he can do as well. So big thing I kind of saw was all the defensemen they drafted weren't right side, and that's one weakness in the system the Canucks have, and they didn't draft anyone with the right hand. So I don't know. That may be because all these guys are just better picks, better overall players. So we'll see what happens there with that. But I'm excited with this draft class, even though they weren't all flashy names. Karamaki was probably the flashiest. But we'll see. The thing is with Alvin, in his history, he's been pretty good with late round picks with the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I'll give him the benefit of the doubt of these picks and see what happens there. So we'll start with you, Peter. What do you think about the Canucks draft class this time?
Yeah, obviously the big one is Karamaki. Jackson Dorrington, I think that was a really good pick later on. Again, Kirill Kudryavtsev is another one of those underrated names that, there was talks that he was going to be an early, possibly second, third rounder. But then as the season wore on, you kind of started to see the flaws in his game a little bit more. But those are things that you could work out. Those are the things and that's why these are all 18-year-old players that, they're still young, they're still learning. I think that those 2 late round picks defense-wise for them, I think it's going to be, interesting to see how they develop because they could use some extra defensemen. Obviously, when you have Karamaki at your disposal, you're going to take him. They're not going to take a swing on a defender like Liam Bixel. But yeah, I think those 2 defenders at that range, and you know what? Who knows what's going to happen next year. I know there's going to be some really good defensive prospects in the 2023 draft. So if there's a name that they stand out in, that mid first round range, that a name stands out, I think you can try and address that as well. But you got some good depth pieces right there with those picks.
Yeah, well, the 2023 draft, like this is insane. So even if you have in the 20s, I didn't mean to
jump ahead, but
yeah, no, it's something we're gonna have to start thinking about pretty quickly already here. Mm-hmm. All right, Devin, just to close this out, what do you think about the Canucks draft class? I mean, of course, Karamaki is the big name, and I thought the Red Wings were going to pick him, honestly, but I went with Casper, which I'm very happy about. So what do you think?
First of all, I think I would have loved to have been a fly on the wall to watch you when Karamaki was the pick, because I'm sure that would have been a sight to see.
I jumped up,
and then we were talking during that mock draft about how Liam Ogren would have made you excited. I can't imagine Jonathan Karamaki. That's a heck of a pick at 15th overall. And then my other thought here is you just said that defense Elias Pettersson happens to wear number 42, 42, not 42. But I think he should wear number 80 because it's double 40, and then he also got picked 80th overall.
Yeah, so there you go.
That's how you distinguish them. Those are my thoughts on the Vancouver draft class.
There's a way to distinguish. We'll go to 80. Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I liked the class. I mean, I liked all 3 of the Maple Leafs, Red Wings, and the Canucks picks this time. So, I didn't mention, I liked the Moldenhauer pick. I read an article by Brooke Laferno, who covers the Chicago Blackhawks. She did a big interview with the coach, with his coach. So definitely check that article out if you're a Maple Leafs fan. You want to find out a bit more about Moldenhauer. Definitely check that article out by Brooke, because it was actually a pretty long one too. So if you want a bit more insight, definitely check that out. Okay, let's end this show off with a few quick hits, and I emphasize quick because we're running long like we always do on this show. If you've watched before, we're always running long. Let's start with the biggest winner of this draft. I mean, there's quite a few, of course, 32 teams, but Peter, you wrote an article on this. But who is your biggest winner of this draft?
I'm going again. I could pick any of the four, but I'm going to go with Seattle. Everyone's going to talk about Shane Wright and there are already comments on there saying that, he dropped because, whatever, growing up to do whatever, all that nonsense. His work ethic is by far one of the best of the draft class. There's no doubt about that. It was like that in the GTHL, his rookie season, the U18s. I think the season just hit a lull because, it was a lot to handle with some players, especially coming back. But the Kraken getting Shane Wright, having not just a top two of Beniers and Wright, but also getting Jager Furcus as a winger. Yeah. You got David Goyette to finish the second round, and you took Ty Nelson to start the third.
Yeah.
That alone is a major haul. We talked about how they were trying to go for a little bit more experience. I know they drafted Riker Evans in the second round last year. They went with, instead of, just trying to make do with the picks that they had, they did their due diligence and they went after quality picks, especially in the first three rounds. That, to me, they're a big winner as a result of that. And also the Tucker Robertson selection could very well be a very underrated one for them. Overage player, but breakout season with 41 goals and 81 points with the Peterborough Petes. So who knows what this holds, but I think their draft prospect pool got a little bit deeper with this draft class, and those picks alone just made it be as a result of that.
Well, I mean, the Kraken draw, having Shane Wright at fourth overall is just insane. When Sean, we mentioned it, but we'll mention you again, Sean. You wrote an article on that saying a draft target, and he got, I don't really want to read the comments of what he got in those, but that it wouldn't happen, him dropping to fourth. And well, look what happened. So
nobody's laughing now.
No one's laughing now. I mean, Sean's laughing to the bank. He should have bought a lottery ticket that day. Didn't though. Probably not. I mean, he's still with the site, so he didn't win $1 million. Devin, who is your biggest winner of this draft?
Yeah, Seattle's definitely a winner for me, just honestly because of their second round. Their second round, like to complement the Shane Wright pick, is humongous, and then getting Ty Nelson in the third round, like Peter mentioned. But the team I'm going to highlight, I kind of alluded to it a little bit ago. I think the Buffalo Sabres getting Matthew Savoy at 9th overall, then getting Noah Ostlund at 16th overall, and then finishing up by getting Yuri Kulich at 28th overall. What a haul to what they've already started to assemble there at Buffalo. I think, everyone at this point knows how big of a fan of Savoy I am. I will be watching Savoy versus Casper for the next 3 years. And then Ostlund, I would have taken Ogren, to be honest with you, but I'm not against the Ostlund pick by any stretch of the imagination. I think he's going to do very well for the Buffalo Sabres. And then Kulich too. That's a good way to, if you come out of the third round with those three players, you've already started to build a solid foundation for your offense, and they already had pieces in place. I've said this multiple times on this show at this point, but I think after seeing the haul that Buffalo got, Buffalo's not the laughing stock of the NHL anymore. I don't care what you think. No. They are building something serious. They are already a up and coming team, and their draft this year only cemented that further. Look out, the Buffalo Sabres are coming.
They've got a pretty good base of prospects now. Holy, I mean, adding those three was just insane. So, we'll see what happens with them. I've got a couple for winners. Chicago Blackhawks is one for me. I mean, they came into the draft with 0 first-round picks, and they end up with 3, and came away with some pretty good players. I mean, as much as you don't like, a lot of people don't like the haul that they got for DeBrincat. You look at the guys they got in this draft. Kevin Korchinski was going to be an amazing defenseman in the NHL. You've got Frank Nazar, who basically replaces DeBrincat in the future if he does, hit that potential. And then you round it out with Sam Renzel, who's a very intriguing defenseman who I think is going to end up being a really good guy too. Like I had him in the first round in my rankings. I think he's going to be really good. Again, we don't know. I mean, a high school guy, we'll see what he does in this year when he starts playing against higher competition and see how he does. But he's got some good potential. But overall, getting 3 first-round picks out of having nothing coming in is pretty good to me. And then the Winnipeg Jets is another one that kind of stuck out because they got Rick McGroarty, who everyone knows how much I like that guy. Goes to a team I don't hate, so it's fine. Going to the Jets. And then Brad Lambert drops to 30 and he goes to the Jets. Of course, we all know about him. We talked about him a bit on the show already, but of how much he was ranked, going into this draft, not going to this one, but, previously he was talked about as being a top 3 pick, even a first overall pick. There was even talk at one point of that. So, I mean, dropping to 30, going to the Jets, he's going to keep developing, and we'll see if he comes over to Seattle. I mean, again, the rights were brought to him, and we'll see if he comes over and actually plays in North America. Like they mentioned on the broadcast about him having fun again and just being a kid. And I think that's a big thing for him. He's having a lot of pressure on him to perform in a men's league. I think he has to go back to playing against his own age group and, dominate. I mean, I think he has to have a really solid season next year. And I think the best way to do that is playing the WHL, but we'll see what happens there. Those are my 2. Okay. Of course we have winners. We have to have losers. Devin, who do you find as a loser overall of this draft, looking at what they got at the end of this?
Oh man.
But we have to do it. We have to go there.
I really want to say, pretty much every team that passed up on Shane Wright, but they all got solid.
We got some good guys,
solid guys in their own right. So I'm not gonna pile on them too much. Biggest loser, honestly, I'm going to say it's hard because I actually think that every team did at least pretty well. I'll say the St. Louis Blues. And the only reason why is because I like Jimmy Snuggerud, but I think that there were other players on the board that I would have taken ahead of him. I would have even been inclined to take Danila Yurov ahead of Snuggerud, and there's all sorts of stuff going on with that situation. Even Brad Lambert, I think there's more upside there with Brad Lambert than there is. And then you just look at their other picks that they've made. They didn't have they did have a second because they didn't have a second. I'm all over the place right now. But they got Kasamaki, they got Botchinger. They got some prospects. Let's call it for what it is. But the thing about Snuggerud too, and this isn't an original Devin thought here. This is I've seen this somewhere else. He has a game that's a lot similar to Jake Neighbors, which is one of if not their top prospect. So it's kind of like it makes sense that they liked him because they like Jake Neighbors, and if they play a similar game, it appeals to them. But it's also like if you have this player already, why do you need another one? Go get something else to complement that player, especially with, like I said, what talent was still on the board. I think what it comes down to me is that they didn't have that second round pick. I had to double check, but they didn't have that second round pick. So they needed to make the most out of the first round pick because they weren't going to pick again until the third round. And I think that they left talent on the board. And St. Louis isn't exactly in a situation where like they need to be making the most out of their picks. But at the same time, you need to make the most out of your picks, whether you're a contender or a rebuilder. And so to pick a player that I don't think had the best upside at 23rd overall, it's just, I wouldn't call them a loser, like I said, because I think every team had some positives to take away, but I think that they could have won a lot or had a bigger, more positive draft than they had.
Yeah, I mean, Snuggerud, I already kind of given my thoughts on him on being a first rounder at all. So, Peter, who do you see as kind of a loser of coming out of this draft?
Well, the easy one would be to say the Colorado Avalanche because they didn't pick until round 6. And they only had 2 picks, but they're the Stanley Cup champs for a reason. So you know what? I'm not going to pick on them. I am going to say the Florida Panthers. A lot of their picks, obviously, again, same situation. They went all in. They traded most of their picks. They didn't pick until round 3, but they took a lot of long-term projects kind of thing. Ludwig Jansen, great offensive defenseman, but a lot of holes defensively. Sandis Vilmanis, a lot of upside there, but is it translatable to the next level? Liam Armsby, again, great centerman, but not going to be in a depth role. So obviously those 6th and 7th round picks aren't going to, account to much. But I think with Jansen and Vilmanis, they're great names, but I think it's just going to be long-term projects later on. And you don't know if they're going to pan out as well as you would hope, but the upside is still there. You just got to be patient. But with the Florida Panthers in the situation that they're in, they have all the patience in the world. So, that was my take. And even in round 3, they took trying to find it. They took Marek Alscher, and names that fell after them were Jeremy Langlois, Nick Moldenhauer, Jordan DeMay, Bryce McConnell-Barker. They had a chance to take one of those 4 players, and I'm very high on all 4 of those players. So to me, that's a bit of a miss. We'll see how it plays out, but a lot of long-term projects, and I think they missed on that 3rd pick.
Mm-hmm. Real quick too, I want to throw out one more team, and I feel bad because I feel like it's a joke to dunk on this team right now, but I honestly would have liked to have seen more out of the Coyotes draft too, especially considering Shane Wright fell and he was sitting there at 3rd overall, and they picked Cooley instead. Cooley's a fantastic prospect and they're going to love him in Arizona, but Shane Wright was sitting there and you said no. What? And then even Connor Geekie at 11. I get it, but at the same time, it's a little too high for me. And we already talked about Maverick Lamoureux. So I think, they had 3 first-round picks and 2 in the top 11. And I don't think they got the, peak value out of those picks.
Yeah, I kind of agree with that too. Wasn't my pick for the loser, but yeah, I could see definitely where that comes from. I'm going to go with the Edmonton Oilers. I mean, as much as I love Reed Schaefer, and I think he's a great prospect, I don't think he's a first-round pick. Also, they traded to go down to that pick. Yes, they traded Zach Cassian, get that contract off the books, similar to what Toronto did, to get Mrazek off. So I get it. I get why they did it, but I don't get why they did it. I don't get why they did it. But I mean, I see the benefit of getting rid of that contract. But the thing is, you do trade down. They were where the Arizona Coyotes were with Maverick Lamoureux. So they could have drafted Brad Lambert at that point. They could have drafted Isaac Howard at that point. Yeah. I think both are better picks than Reed Schaefer for the Oilers. So, I mean, like I said, I love the guy. Yeah.
Isaac Howard to me kind of reminds me of Dylan Holloway. So you would have got another version of him.
Yeah. I mean, or getting Brad Lambert, who could potentially be a top line forward playing with Connor McDavid. I'd say he'd be pretty lethal with him. So, that's to me. I mean, the Oilers, like I said, you get rid of a contract, but I think in the end, you're probably going to look back at this and say, well, we probably should have, it probably been better to have Brad Lambert or Isaac Howard here. So, I mean, there's a few other guys that drafted in the 2nd round that made Jagger Firkus would have been, I think, a better pick there, even at 32, honestly. But that's just how they went, and we'll see. We'll see. And that's our tagline on this show is we'll see. Because that's all we can do. All right, couple more questions and we wrap up here. Quickly, a potential steal from where they were selected. We'll look back 5 years and say, hey, why was this guy drafted there? Peter, what do you think?
Devin already mentioned him, Bryce McConnell-Barker.
Yeah.
Enough said.
Yeah.
He should not have fallen that low to close to the 4th round. I've always been high on him from the very beginning. I had him as a top 50 pick, top 45, I think, for my final rankings. How he fell that low with his 2-way play and his shot, I just don't get it.
Yeah, I don't understand that too. I thought it was a 2nd round pick for sure. Okay, Devin, who do you think is going to be a guy we're going to look back and say, why was he drafted so low?
Well, what about the guy picked right before Bryce McConnell Barker too, Jordan Dumais? I think
Yeah.
he has potential to be a real steal coming there in the late third round. The one, he's been mentioned a couple of times now. The one that really stands out to me is Brad Lambert. Because getting him at 30, we've talked about this multiple times. If he hits and he reaches his potential, he's going to be a top 10 player out of this class. So to get him at 30, that is all you can hope for the Winnipeg Jets. So I'm glad he didn't fall out of the first round entirely, because that would have been asinine in my opinion. Good on the Winnipeg Jets for taking a chance on him, because I'm willing to bet he has a better season next year than he did this year.
Yeah, for sure. One of my picks would have been McGroarty, but he got drafted where I thought. So exactly where I thought, actually. So I mean, he's not going to be a steal to me. If he would have dropped further than that, I would say him. But you already know mine, Lane Hudson. Why to be drafted almost to the third round? It makes no sense to me. I think he's going to be a 50, 60 point defenseman in his prime. Perennial guy that way. I think he's going to be one of those, your teams are going to be like, what the heck? Why didn't we pick him there? Yeah. Because he's just a heck of a skilled defenseman, and being in Montreal, and Montreal fans are going to love this guy. He's going to be electrifying with playing with Cole Caulfield and all your speedy guys there, because he's going to fit in really well with what the Canadians look to be doing. They want to be a high pace, high skill team, and Hudson's going to fit in perfectly. So you're going to look back. I mean, trust me, 5 years, you're going to be saying, why did he get drafted towards the third round? Yeah. There's a few guys. I mean, there's quite a few guys we could probably pick from this class as being steals when they were drafted pretty far down in the list. All right. Of course, we have to have a bust out of here. Who do you feel? I mean, this is too early. Like I say, I don't like tagging team guys with this bust tag, but we'll do it. Devin, who do you see as a guy who's drafted too high and is going to turn out to be a bit of a mistake where he was?
Well, I'm gonna offer up two, because I think there's one who fits the typical definition of bust, and then there's one that I think fits the definition in terms of not being where they like too high, but still like a good player. That one in particular is Slafkovsky. Still think Slafkovsky is going to be a phenomenal player. I think Montreal fans are going to, even the ones that booed on the draft floor, are going to grow to love him. But do I think he was the top prospect in this class? No, I do not. And that is why I think he's a potential bust factor, just for not living up to first overall billing. And then the other one, already mentioned it a number of times, Maverick Lamoureux. First round talent. I don't see it, but I've been proven wrong many times before. So I hope for the Coyotes' sake and what they're trying to do in the desert, that he does prove to be worth the 29th overall pick.
Yeah, those two are definite picks for me too. But like I say, we'll see what happens with them too. Peter, who do you see as a kind of a bust when we look down the road in this draft?
Yeah, and again, kind of like what Devin said, not necessarily a bust in the sense that they're not going to be great NHLers. It's just, too high. I'm going to go back to Philip Beestead for me. I think that was a little bit high for him. Sam Rinzel is that kind of boomer bust pick, kind of like Scott Morrow, but at the same time, I think he's got a better defensive game than Scott Morrow, so he's got that going for him. But I'm going to say Nathan Gauthier from the Anaheim Ducks, mainly because of, he's a big guy. He's a great two-way centerman, but it kind of reminds me of the Frederick Gauthier pick from the Maple Leafs. And I'm not comparing the two, but the projectability and where he would fit in the lineup. He's going to be probably a middle, at worst, third line, at best, second line. So middle six centerman. Don't see maybe a whole lot of production, but then again, I could be wrong. He does drive to the net a lot, and he's got great power to do that. So I think he's got that going for him, where maybe that kind of scenario may not play out, but there always the possibility that, 6'3", 207. Yeah, he's mobile, he's physical, but maybe the offensive game just isn't there, where you could have taken maybe a little bit more upside in Snuggerud, in Yurov, in Kulich, Yuri Kulich even. I think he's got more upside than Nathan Gauthier. And to have a center tandem of Mason McTavish and Yuri Kulich, or, I believe Zegras is a center too, right? So Zegras, McTavish, who could play wing, and then Kulich. I think that would be much more better than Nathan Gauthier, but we'll see.
Yeah. Mine's Connor Geekie at 11th overall.
Yeah.
Like we've talked about Geekie at length on this show quite a bit. But I had him ranked later in the first round. A few guys had him there, and he goes 11th overall to the Coyotes. I don't know. I think Geekie's going to end up being, like I say, a solid NHLer, but not a top 15 pick type.
Yeah.
Especially when you have guys like Frank Nazar sitting there, Rutger McGroarty sitting there, which would have been great in the Coyotes, just for the name itself. LeCare Mackey was sitting there. He would have been a great fit in Arizona too. There's so many other guys that would have picked ahead of Geekie at that point. And like I say, Geekie's not going to end up being a horrible NHL player. I think he's going to end up being really good. But I think upside is more of a third line guy, not top 6. So, but again, our tagline, we will see what happens. That's just how it is with these prospects. We have to wait and see how they develop in the systems that they are in now, or end up not being. They may end up be traded before they end up playing an NHL game. So that's happened many a time in the NHL for these guys. So that wraps up an episode. It's a little longer, like I anticipated. Lots of stuff to talk about on the post-draft. We're going to have a ton more. We're going to have episodes focused directly on different teams. So we'll probably maybe bring on some writers to talk their draft classes. So looking forward to that. We'll go a bit more deeper into the picks of all these teams. So look out for that in the off season, because we won't have much else to talk about because prospects aren't playing. So except we do have World Juniors in August. So we will have some episodes on that. So it's not going to be all draft, post-draft stuff. We'll talk about World Juniors, which some of these guys may be in. So we'll definitely be extensively covering that tournament when it happens, when something usually doesn't happen in August. So that's great. Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Devin, for coming on the show. Of course, being on the show every week with me and as the line mates on the Prospect Corner. Make sure to check out the Morning Skate newsletter. Great content every day. I think it does go down to, it's not every day during the off season, but whenever it comes to your inbox, it'll be there for you. Make sure to check that out. As a link in the description there. And, of course, check out all the post-draft coverage we have on the hockeywriters.com, because every coverage team is going through, looking at their draft classes, delving into that analysis, all that fun stuff. Of course, trades and free agency starts on July 13th, which we don't cover extensively because prospects aren't really involved in that. But there's going to be that on the website as well. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in again, and we will see you next time on the Prospect Corner.